They dragged her across the polished marble lobby of the bank like she was nothing more than a problem to be removed. Shoes scraping, purse spilling open, whispers spreading through the line of customers who pretended not to stare while staring anyway. Because that's how it always goes when a black woman raises her voice in a place where power is assumed to belong to someone else. And her name was Alana Brooks, dressed plainly in a gray coat and flats, no makeup, hair pulled back tight because she wasn't there to impress anyone. She was there to do a quiet job no one was supposed to notice. But it all went sideways the moment the teller froze her account and called security, claiming suspicious behavior. Even though Alana had said nothing more than, "I need to speak to your manager." And within minutes 2 uniformed cops stormed in like the building was under siege, hands already hovering near their belts, eyes locked on her like she'd been marked before she ever opened her mouth. And when she calmly asked why she was being detained, one of them told her to lower her tone, even though she wasn't raising it. And that's when the crowd started murmuring and phones quietly lifted, because everyone knows what comes next, and it did, fast and ugly. The officer grabbed her arm, twisted it behind her back. She stumbled. Her purse slipped off her shoulder, papers sliding across the floor, and when she protested, still calm, still controlled, they decided that was resisting. And suddenly she was being hauled toward the exit, her cheek brushing the cold stone floor as someone gasped and someone else said, "She didn't do anything." But no one stepped forward, because fear is louder than justice in rooms like that, and as they dragged her, something small and leather-bound slipped from her purse, skidding across the marble and stopping near the shoes of a middle-aged man in a suit who bent down to pick it up, frowning as he opened it, because inside was not an ID card or a credit card but a federal badge, gold and unmistakable, the kind you don't see unless your life has just taken a sharp turn, and the man's face drained of color as he read the letters, FBI, while at the same moment Alana finally said, her voice sharp now, cutting through the noise, "You might want to check that badge before you put cuffs on me." And everything slowed, like the air itself had thickened. One officer froze mid-step, the other scoffed, because disbelief is easier than accountability. But then the manager rushed forward, eyes wide, recognizing the seal, recognizing the disaster unfolding in real time, and suddenly the officers weren't dragging her anymore. They were standing there unsure, hands loosening, radios crackling as someone whispered, "Is this real?" And Alana stood up slowly, brushing dust from her coat. Not angry, not yelling, just tired in the way only someone who's seen this before can be tired. Because this wasn't her first time being underestimated, it was just the first time it happened during an active undercover operation. And as she retrieved the badge and held it up, the room went silent enough to hear the hum of the lights, and she explained, calmly, that she was a senior financial crimes investigator tracing a money laundering pipeline that ran through the bank itself, that the frozen account belonged to a shell company tied to a much larger federal case, and that the very manager who had called the police was now sweating because he knew exactly what that meant, because twists don't always come with music, sometimes they come with paperwork, and Alana had plenty of it, and as backup agents arrived, plain clothes, unassuming, already positioned nearby, the truth spilled out fast, that the bank had been flagging accounts selectively, targeting clients who wouldn't push back, moving funds quietly before audits, and that Alana's suspicious behavior was actually her noticing a discrepancy that could blow the entire scheme wide open. And now the cops who dragged her were being gently but firmly pulled aside, their body cams already under review, their supervisor on the phone asking questions that made their posture shrink by the second, while customers who had filmed began to realize they were witnesses to something bigger than a viral clip, and the man who'd picked up the badge kept shaking his head, muttering, "I knew something was wrong," as if knowing after the fact could rewrite the moment. He'd stayed silent, and the manager was escorted into a back office where handcuffs waited for him instead. Because the real crime had never been Alana standing her ground. It had been greed wrapped in authority, and as the dust settled, stop scrolling before you hear another excuse, another headline, another half-told story. Hit subscribe right now because what you're about to hear sounds like a nightmare ripped from America's deepest fears. And if you ever wondered how fast dignity can be stripped away in public, how power hides behind uniforms, and how truth can fall out of a pocket and flip the entire room upside down, this story is for you. So subscribe and stay with me, because in a downtown bank lobby on a bright weekday morning, while polished marble floors reflected flags and security cameras hummed like bored witnesses. A black woman named Aaliyah Brooks was dragged screaming across the floor by two uniformed cops who claimed she was causing a disturbance. And every single person watching, from the elderly man clutching a deposit slip to the young teller frozen behind bulletproof glass, assumed they already knew how the story would end, because Aaliyah wore a simple gray coat, carried a worn leather bag, and spoke with the calm insistence of someone refusing to be ignored. And when the branch manager pointed at her and said she didn't belong there, the lie slid easily into the air. And when the cops arrived with hands already resting on batons, the truth didn't stand a chance, not at first, because Aaliyah wasn't there to rob the bank or beg or cause chaos. She was there to quietly observe, to follow a trail of numbers tied to a shell account laundering money for a violent crime ring that had already left bodies in 3 states, and she had chosen that bank because the criminals believed it was invisible, safe, protected by assumptions, just like they believed she would be invisible too. And as she waited in line, eyes scanning reflections and exits, she noticed the subtle signal. A man tapping twice on the counter, a teller adjusting her name badge in a specific way, and she knew the transfer was about to happen, so she stepped forward and asked a question that sounded harmless but carried weight. And that was when everything shifted, because the teller's smile cracked, the manager stiffened, and within seconds voices rose, accusations flew, and Aaliyah felt the familiar tightening in her chest that came not from fear but from bitter recognition. Because she had been here before in different forms, in airports, traffic stops, conference rooms, always forced to prove she had a right to stand where she stood. And when the manager called the police instead of compliance, Aaliyah considered flashing her credentials, but years in federal work had taught her that timing was everything, and exposing yourself too early could burn months of work and put lives at risk. So she chose to hold the line verbally, calmly repeating that she had official business and needed the transaction paused. And that was enough to brand her a problem, enough for 2 cops to storm in with practiced authority, asking who the troublemaker was. And when the manager pointed at Aaliyah, without hesitation, the cops didn't ask for context. They didn't ask for identification beyond a dismissive glance at her driver's license. They didn't ask why a calm woman with no weapon and no raised voice needed to be handled. They simply told her to put her hands behind her back, and when she resisted verbally, saying she was a federal agent and needed to speak to their supervisor, one cop laughed and said, "Yeah, and I'm the president." And the other grabbed her arm, twisting it painfully, and the room filled with gasps as Aaliyah was pulled off balance, her bag slipping from her shoulder, papers scattering like frightened birds. And as she fell to her knees, she felt the cold certainty that the operation was collapsing, that the suspects were watching, that the transfer would vanish. And still she shouted, not insults, not threats, but procedure, badge numbers, jurisdiction, words that meant nothing to people who had already decided who she was. And then they dragged her, literally dragged her, across the lobby, her coat riding up, her voice echoing against stone, phones coming out, whispers turning to murmurs, some people horrified, others satisfied that order was being restored. And